Turn off the damn oven already. We are not gonna let you turn this neighborhood into a damn ghetto bakery. The words hit her porch like bricks. Camille Hayes stepped outside in her flour-dusted apron, her hands still warm from kneading dough. Her 7-year-old son, Miles, peeked through the screen door behind her, eyes wide. The scent of cinnamon, butter, and freshly baked banana bread floated gently through the air, but the rage on her neighbor's face made it feel like poison. Across the walkway stood Judy Caldwell, a tightly wound woman in her late 50s, arms crossed over her floral-printed chest, her pearl earrings glinting in the Georgia sun like tiny knives. Her lips were curled into a sneer. And next to her, David Landon, early 60s, red-faced and breathing heavy like he just marched across a battlefield. He held his phone up, recording like he was catching a criminal in action. Camille didn't flinch or panic. "Is there a problem?" she asked calmly, brushing her palms on her apron. "Yeah," Judy snapped, stepping forward. "There's a big problem. We've got a single mother turning her kitchen into a 24-hour bake sale, sending delivery drivers to block driveways and luring in God knows who from across town." Camille blinked. "Luring?" David gestured to her front steps, where a small tray of wrapped pastries waited for pickup. "You're not allowed to run a commercial business in a residential neighborhood. It's in the HOA bylaws. We've already reported you. You've got kids running in and out of here like it's a corner store," Judy added. "Some of us moved here for peace." Camille's voice was steady, but there was fire beneath it. "My sons live here. They were born here. Their father died in this house. And what I bake, it pays for their school books and light bills. That's all." Judy folded her arms tighter. "It's always the same story, isn't it? Sympathy, struggle, but no accountability." Camille took a slow step forward. "No, it's not always the same story. Sometimes, it's a mother trying to feed her babies without asking for help from people who never offered any." David's voice cut in, low and smug. "You're not licensed. You're not inspected. You're not welcome." And just like that, Miles opened the screen door behind her and whispered, "Mama, what's going on?" Camille turned halfway, blocking him from view with her body. "It's nothing, baby. Go inside." Judy smirked. "Maybe if you had a real job, you wouldn't need to bake for scraps." Camille's fists clenched at her sides. Her heart pounded, but her voice remained steel. "You know what's funny?" she said. "You call what I do scraps, but every Sunday Ms. Ramirez from your church comes to my porch for a sweet potato pie and tips me extra because her daughter loves it." David's face darkened. "We're giving you official notice," he said. "You'll be receiving a formal HOA complaint within 48 hours. And trust me, if you don't shut this illegal operation down, we'll take it up with the city." Camille looked at him, then at Judy, then at the phone, still recording. "Go ahead," she said. "File your complaint. But when this is all over, don't forget this moment. Don't forget who you tried to humiliate in front of her child. And don't forget who stood here with flour on her hands and didn't flinch." They left. But the silence they left behind was louder than any slur. The door closed softly behind her. Camille leaned back against it, her chest rising and falling in quiet rage. Her kitchen still smelled like hope, warm and sweet and full of memory. But her hands trembled as she packed up the last of the loaves. Her eyes burned as she wiped the counter. This wasn't the first time she'd been underestimated. Or targeted. It was just the first time they came for her house, the last piece of Marcus she had left. She sat at the dining table, flipping through the HOA handbook they left on her doorstep like a threat. Highlighted passages. Circled clauses. Warnings. They were trying to bury her under bureaucracy, hoping she'd be too tired, too busy, or too broke to fight back. But what they didn't know, she had nothing left to lose, and a reason to win that came in pairs, Elijah and Miles. She opened her laptop. First tab, Home Bakery Laws in Georgia. Second tab, Black-owned real estate cooperatives near me. Third tab, How to form a legal food entity. She'd spent the last few years kneading dough in silence. Now she was done being quiet. And while Judy and David thought they were pressing her down, Camille was about to rise. Just like her bread. Camille sat in the soft glow of her kitchen at 2:14 a.m., the hum of the refrigerator the only sound besides the occasional crackle of cooling bread. The kids had been asleep for hours, their homework still sitting in neat piles on the corner of the dining table. Her apron was still tied around her waist, streaked with flour and cinnamon, but she hadn't baked in hours. She was reading, line by line, code by code, ordinance by ordinance, every zoning law in her district, every clause in the HOA's agreement, every loophole that might be the thread she could tug until the entire knot came undone. They thought she wouldn't know where to begin. They were wrong. In a worn spiral notebook, she had scribbled down things like cottage food law, permit for home bakery, non-commercial pickup only, LLC under same address, tax deductions, home business. She flipped to the next page and underlined the one phrase that lit something inside her chest. Zoning restrictions do not apply to registered cottage food operators producing under state limits for direct-to-consumer sales. In Georgia, she could legally sell baked goods from her home, so long as she followed food safety guidelines and registered her business, which meant David and Judy had no case. They were counting on her fear, not the facts. She reached for her phone and dialed the number she'd written in the corner of the page. Miss April Watkins, legal aid and small business mentor with the Metro Atlanta Black Business Association. It rang twice before a warm, husky voice answered. April speaking. Camille introduced herself and explained her situation, not with desperation, but quiet determination. As she spoke, she could hear the shift in April's tone. I know your street, April said. I've had calls from that neighborhood before. Camille's voice was steady. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not shutting down. There was a pause. Then April replied, good. Then let's get you licensed, documented, and protected. Because if they want a war in court, we'll walk in with a folder they can't touch. Camille almost cried. Not because she was weak, but because for the first time in months, she felt seen without having to scream. The next morning, the boys sat at the breakfast table, still groggy-eyed, eating scrambled eggs and toast. Can I help you bake today? Elijah asked between bites. Camille smiled. Not today, baby. Today, Mama's going downtown. Miles perked up. Are they gonna arrest those mean people? Camille paused, kneeling beside him. No, sweetheart. But we're going to make sure they can't take away our home. And that means we do this the smart way. The strong way. Like Daddy would? Elijah added softly. Camille nodded. Exactly like that. By the end of the week, Camille had registered Hayes & Sons Home Bakery as a licensed Georgia cottage food business, completed an online food safety course and printed the certificate, filed for an EIN and opened a small business checking account, and perhaps most satisfying, mailed a formal response to the HOA's violation notice, attaching proof of her compliance with Georgia state law. David Landon's name was bolded in the CC section. But that wasn't the end of it, because what April said next planted the seed that would flip everything. You ever thought about investing in property? She'd asked one afternoon as they shared coffee in her office. Camille shook her head. With what money? April chuckled. You'd be surprised. We've got a coal. Black investors, doctors, teachers, barbers, single moms. We pool our money. We buy strategically. Then we rent or flip. And trust me, your neighborhood is on our radar. Camille leaned forward, her hands wrapped around her mug. My neighborhood? Yep, April said. Properties are undervalued now. But the city just approved a light rail expansion 2 miles down. That block's about to get real popular. People like Landon and Caldwell think they own it, but they're sitting on land they can't afford to maintain long-term. Camille looked out the window, mind racing. What would I need to get started? April smiled. Faith, paperwork, and the fire I already see in you. 2 months passed. Camille's bakery was thriving. Word had spread, quietly, efficiently, and now she had a regular stream of customers picking up bread and pies by appointment. She even created a tiny corner in her foyer with labeled shelves, business cards, and a chalkboard sign that read, Made with memory, priced with purpose. Elijah helped with labels. Miles helped with taste testing. And Judy and David? They weren't quiet, but they were getting louder in different ways. David began complaining at HOA meetings about rising property taxes. Judy had been seen arguing with a landscaper about cutting back this month. Camille watched from her porch, saying nothing, but noting everything. Then one evening, April called. "You remember those 3 properties the HOA president mentioned in the neighborhood report?" she asked. "Yeah," Camille replied, loading pies into her second-hand car. "One of them? A foreclosure. And the owners? Desperate. I think it's time we made a move." Camille's hand paused midair. "Wait, are you saying?" April's voice dropped low with delight. "I'm saying, Camille, how would you like to buy the house next door to David Landon?" Camille looked across the street at Landon's place. The perfectly trimmed hedges, the American flag swaying stiffly on its pole, the porch camera that still tilted slightly toward her door. She smiled. "I'd like that very much." The for sale sign went up on a Wednesday afternoon. It stood awkwardly in the front yard like a wounded soldier, rusted, sun-bleached, and slightly bent at the base. The house belonged to an older couple who'd quietly slipped into foreclosure after their son defaulted on a business loan and pulled them under in the process. Camille had only spoken to them once, years ago, when they asked if her boys could stop skateboarding too close to their driveway. Now their windows were boarded up, their lawn uncut. The shame of financial loss hung like humidity in Georgia's July heat. Camille stood on her porch with a paper plate of cinnamon rolls in her hand, watching a young white real estate agent hammer the sign into the ground. He didn't even look at her. That was fine. He would later. 2 days later, she was inside that house, not as a visitor, but as a buyer. April met her at the front door with a clipboard and a satisfied smile. "Let me introduce you to your new asset." The living room smelled like stale carpet and regret. But Camille saw more than that. She saw potential. She saw possibility. She saw the front bay window repainted. She saw college students renting the upstairs room. She saw a business opportunity that would shut David and Judy up in the only language they truly understood, ownership. April handed her a single sheet of paper. "Offer was accepted this morning," she said. "You'll close in 2 weeks. The co-op is backing the remainder. But they wanted you to be the name on the paperwork." Camille blinked. "Me?" April nodded. "They believe in legacy. And you've shown more grit than anyone I've worked with in the past year. You earned this, Camille." Tears prickled at the corners of Camille's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She'd cried too many nights on her own kitchen floor, thinking her life had shrunk into a 10 by 12 oven. Now it was expanding quietly, powerfully. By the end of the week, Camille received a letter in the mail. It wasn't folded neatly. It was stuffed angrily into her mailbox, torn at the edge like someone had regretted even sending it. It was from Judy Caldwell. A typed complaint, once again referencing noise disturbances, suspicious foot traffic, and a general sense of unease caused by unsanctioned home activity. But this time, Camille didn't even flinch. She walked straight to her new home, across the street, and taped a copy of her signed purchase agreement to the window facing Judy's house. In bold, black marker, she added one line beneath it. "Welcome to the new normal." The next morning, Judy didn't wave. David didn't nod. In fact, for the first time in months, they didn't even leave the house. Their blinds stayed drawn. The porch light stayed off. Camille sat on her own porch swing, sipping sweet tea, watching the world settle into a new shape. It didn't stop there. April's real estate co-op wasn't just interested in a single property. They were looking at 3 others on the same block, including one that backed up directly to the Landon's backyard. That one was a rental. The tenants had been struggling since COVID. The owners? Out of state and ready to offload. Camille was invited to the next strategy meeting. Held in a rented library room downtown, the co-op team looked nothing like the stuffy boardrooms on TV. These were working-class professionals, educators, nurses, postal workers, coders. One even introduced herself as a full-time Uber driver and part-time notary. But what united them was purpose. "We're tired of watching these neighborhoods flip without us," said Darnell, a bearded accountant who managed the fund's ledger. So we flip 'em ourselves? Camille listened carefully, taking notes, asking questions. Every move felt surreal. Just 6 months ago, she'd barely known how to price a cupcake. Now she was learning about property liens, LLC protections, and generational equity. After the meeting, April pulled her aside. You know, we've been eyeing the HOA leadership in your neighborhood. You ever looked at their budget disclosures? Camille blinked. They have to disclose those? April smiled slyly. Every HOA is required to. And David's been managing that fund for 6 years without a second pair of eyes. Camille didn't need more details. She already knew what to do next. The library printer hummed quietly as she scrolled through 87 pages of HOA financial records, downloaded from the local county portal. There was, tucked between budget lines and vague expense reports, $3,500 allocated to outdoor beautification, paid to a vendor named Landco Solutions. A quick search showed Landco was a landscaping business registered under one David T. Landon. He had been paying himself, using community funds. Camille printed every receipt. She didn't call the police. She didn't scream about injustice. Instead, she walked into the next HOA meeting, held in the community clubhouse, with her documentation in one hand and 2 peach pies in the other. Neighbors turned as she entered, murmuring, uncertain of her intent. David looked up and froze. "Camille," he said tightly, "this is a closed board meeting." She set the pies on the table. "I brought dessert," she said sweetly. "But I also brought this." She handed the manila folder to Michelle Thompson, the HOA's secretary, one of the few board members not directly under David's thumb. Michelle opened the folder. Her eyes widened as she scanned the first few pages. Camille spoke clearly, calmly. "No venom. No rage. I believe this constitutes a conflict of interest and potentially misuse of HOA funds. I'm not making accusations. I'm asking for transparency and accountability." The room shifted. Michelle cleared her throat. "We'll need to take a formal vote to open an audit." David tried to object, but his voice cracked under pressure. "This is a misunderstanding." Camille smiled. "That's what audits are for, David. To clarify misunderstandings." Outside, the air was heavy with summer. The cicadas buzzed in the trees. Camille walked back to her house, the original one, and sat on her porch steps. Elijah joined her, a half-melted popsicle in hand. "Why did that man look so mad, Mama?" Camille chuckled softly. "Because people like him don't like when the rules apply to everyone." Elijah nodded, content with that answer. Camille watched the sun dip low behind the rooftops she now partially owned. She had started this war baking bread in silence. Now, she was flipping deeds and uncovering fraud, all with the same steady hands. The audit took exactly 17 days. Not that Camille was counting. But every morning, she marked a quiet X on the corner of her calendar with a red pen, right after breakfast and before rolling out dough. It wasn't an act of vengeance. It was a ritual. A reminder that time could serve the patient, and that truth, when given room, often rose like yeast. The neighborhood buzzed with quiet anxiety. The HOA newsletter, once filled with cheerful updates about block parties and lawn awards, had gone silent. Michelle Thompson, the board secretary who received Camille's envelope, had since resigned from her position, citing irreconcilable ethical conflicts. Behind closed doors, something was shifting. The email came on a Thursday. It was from the County Compliance Department, confirming the results of the community-requested audit. Camille read it once, then again, her fingers trembling not with fear but with the electricity of vindication. In short, the audit had confirmed her suspicions. David Landon had diverted over $12,000 in HOA funds to his own landscaping business, billed the community for unperformed work, and authorized payments without proper voting procedures. The audit didn't just recommend his immediate removal, it demanded it. The next HOA meeting was mandatory. This time, it would be open to every homeowner. Camille showed up early. She wore a blue wrap dress and soft gold earrings that had once belonged to her mother. Her hair was pulled into a crown braid, and she held her head high, not with arrogance, but with the quiet dignity of someone who had endured the worst and still stood unshaken. Elijah and Naomi stayed with a neighbor. They didn't need to witness this part. This was for the grown-ups who had underestimated her. The community clubhouse was fuller than ever. Couples who never waved on the street. Renters who had felt invisible. Owners who had questions they were too afraid to ask last year. The room, for once, felt balanced. Black, white, brown. All eyes were alert. David sat at the front of the room, face tight, fingers laced together, flanked by two remaining board members who looked visibly uncomfortable. His usual composure had worn thin, and his tie hung slightly askew. The scent of nerves filled the air. Michelle, although no longer on the board, stood near the podium. The audit results have been reviewed by both the county and our independent financial consultant, she began. There are clear violations, financial, procedural, and ethical. As a result, a vote will be conducted tonight to determine the removal of David Landon from his position as HOA president. Murmurs rose. Someone gasped. Someone clapped. David stood abruptly, voice raised. This is a witch hunt. This woman, he pointed toward Camille, has been on a crusade since the day she moved here. She's run an illegal business from her house, created nuisance in the neighborhood, and now she wants to tear this community apart. Camille rose slowly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't point fingers. Instead, she spoke with the cadence of someone who had spoken only when necessary for far too long. My name is Camille Rhodes. I am a mother of two. A widow. A baker. A neighbor. And now, a property owner on this very block. The room went silent. I have obeyed every law. Paid every tax. Filed every form. And when I was harassed, I didn't throw stones. I baked bread. I fed this community. And when I was targeted again, I sought justice, not revenge. She held up a copy of the audit report. This isn't about me. It's about accountability, about fairness, about how we govern ourselves when no one's watching. David's mouth opened, then closed. No words came. The vote was unanimous. He was removed. But the story didn't end there. The following week, an unfamiliar white SUV parked in front of the Caldwell house. A couple in business casual attire stepped out, realtors. A sign went up later that evening, coming soon, property available. Camille sat with her daughter Naomi on the front step, a bowl of peach cobbler resting between them. Naomi had seen the sign to, "Are they moving, Mama?" Camille didn't smile. She didn't gloat. "Looks like it." Naomi was quiet for a moment. "You think they'll say sorry?" Camille looked across the street, where Judy stood behind her screen door, pretending not to stare back. "Maybe. But if they don't, that's okay. Sometimes justice doesn't look like an apology. Sometimes it looks like silence. Like peace." She looked down at her daughter. "And sometimes it looks like us, still here." By the end of the month, April called her again. "You're not gonna believe this," she said, half laughing. "Guess who just listed the duplex next to the rental you already co-own?" Camille didn't guess. David and Judy Landon. April paused. "Want it?" Camille leaned back in her chair. "Can we afford it?" "With your equity stake and the co-op's backing, yes. Especially if they're trying to get out quick. We can get it under asking." Camille didn't hesitate. "Let's do it." The closing took less than 30 minutes. The new deed was signed on a rainy Tuesday in a neutral office space downtown. David didn't attend. Judy sat at the far end of the table, eyes glassy, lips pressed so tightly together they were nearly white. Camille walked in quietly, umbrella dripping, clutching a manila folder under one arm and a simple bouquet of flowers in the other. Judy raised an eyebrow. "You think flowers will make this cute?" "No," Camille said, setting the bouquet on the table. "These are for the receptionist. She's been kind every time I've come here. Thought she deserved something." Judy flinched. The papers were signed without a word. Camille left with keys in her hand. That weekend, a moving truck pulled away from the Caldwell home. Camille watched from her kitchen, oven warm, arms dusted with flour. Elijah danced into the room with a note from a neighbor, thanking her for the banana bread she left on their porch. Naomi followed, balancing her science fair project. Outside, kids laughed. Someone mowed their lawn. A block once divided by prejudice was now joined, slowly, imperfectly, by truth. Not everyone had changed. Not everyone had apologized. But the ground had shifted. And Camille had planted something stronger than bitterness, roots. Summer came to Atlanta like a quiet thunder, hot, relentless, and shimmering with possibility. For the first time in 4 years, the community flyer didn't come from the HOA's board. It came from Camille Rhodes. Printed in warm tones and sealed with care, the invitation read, "You're invited to the first annual Blossom Street Block Party, hosted by the Rhodes family and friends. Food, music, fellowship, a taste of unity. All are welcome." At first, no one quite believed it. The same Camille who once stood silently on her porch as her neighbors sneered at her cinnamon rolls? The same woman who endured HOA fines and whispered gossip for running a home bakery? She was now throwing a party? But that was the point. Camille wasn't trying to erase what had happened. She was building something new on top of it. The weeks leading up to the event were a whirlwind of planning. Naomi painted signs and Elijah hand-delivered invitations door to door, often receiving hesitant but curious smiles in return. Camille coordinated with April and the cooperative to sponsor extra tents, folding chairs, and a stage for live music. Even the city chipped in with a permit for street closure and a sanitation crew. The morning of the event, Camille stood on her porch with a coffee cup in hand, surveying the street she once feared walking alone at night. Folding tables lined both sidewalks, dressed in checkered cloths and flower centerpieces. String lights zigzagged overhead. Smokers sizzled on grills, and speakers played soft Motown in the background. The smell of baked goods, roasted corn, and smoked ribs filled the air. One by one, families emerged from their homes, drawn by the music and the laughter. For the first time, color didn't define the cliques. Parents chatted while their children played. Longtime neighbors introduced themselves as if meeting again for the first time. Camille stood behind the dessert table, wearing her signature navy apron with Rhodes Bakery embroidered in cursive. Her pound cake slices vanished faster than she could cut them. Naomi manned the lemonade stand. Elijah helped the band set up. It was joy, simple and unfiltered. But it wasn't until the moment Judy Landon walked onto the street that the real shift happened. She wore no pearls, no smirk, just a pale yellow cardigan and a plastic tub in her hands. People turned. Conversations paused. Even the music seemed to dim as eyes followed her across the pavement. She stopped in front of Camille. "I baked banana pudding," she said, eyes low. "It's not as good as yours. But I figured, maybe there's room for it." Camille looked at her for a long moment. Then she stepped aside and made space on the table. "There's room." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. They stood there, side by side, behind the dessert table. Judy said nothing else. Camille didn't need her to. As the sun began to set, Marcus, the local journalist who had quietly followed Camille's journey since the audit, approached with a small camera crew. "Camille," he said, gently, "would you mind saying a few words on camera? Just about what today means?" She nodded. Standing on the makeshift stage, flanked by Naomi and Elijah, Camille looked out at the street filled with faces that once felt like enemies. Her voice was soft, but it carried. "I used to think survival was enough. That keeping quiet, working hard, and staying out of the way would protect me. But survival isn't peace. And silence doesn't buy justice." A hush fell over the crowd. "There was a time when some of you didn't know my name, or didn't care to learn it. I was just that woman with the kids or the bakery lady. But today, you've shared your tables. You've brought your children. And whether you realize it or not, you've started to change the story we all live in." She turned slightly toward Judy, who stood near the dessert table, watching with folded arms. Change doesn't happen all at once. It starts with someone telling the truth. With someone saying enough. With someone choosing to stand when it's easier to shrink. Camille took a breath. "I'm not here because I wanted revenge. I'm here because I wanted my children to see that they matter. That their mother's work matters. That no one should be made to feel small for simply trying to live." She looked out over the crowd, some with tears, some nodding quietly. This block party isn't about me. It's about all of us. It's about building something new, even on top of broken ground. A wave of applause rippled through the crowd. It wasn't wild or chaotic. It was steady. Honest. That night, Camille sat on her porch swing, barefoot, with a glass of sweet tea in hand. Naomi had fallen asleep on the couch. Elijah curled next to her, holding a half-eaten cookie. April called. "You did it," she said. Camille smiled. "We did it. You know the co-op wants you to speak next month, right? At the Real Estate Investor Summit. You're becoming kind of a legend." Camille laughed softly. "Let them tell whatever story they want. I've got dough to proof tomorrow." But inside, she felt something shift. Not just peace but power. Months later, Blossom Street had a new rhythm. Camille now co-owned 3 properties on the block. 2 were rented to single mothers through the housing equity program she helped launch with April's guidance. The third? She turned it into a small baking studio, complete with a classroom space where Naomi helped teach after-school baking lessons for neighborhood kids. David Landon never returned. His real estate license was under investigation. But Camille didn't follow the details. She had moved on. Judy, surprisingly, showed up every Thursday for baking class. She never stayed long. But each week, she brought something. Ingredients, napkins, a batch of muffins. Camille always made space. Not forgiveness, but space. This story wasn't just about a home bakery or a bitter HOA. It was about the resilience of Black motherhood. About dignity in the face of humiliation. About how small acts, kneading dough, raising children, showing up, can change the entire fabric of a neighborhood. If this story moved you, then share it. Let someone else witness Camille's victory. Leave a comment. Tell us about a moment when you or someone you know turned injustice into growth. And if you believe in the quiet power of standing your ground and rewriting the ending, then subscribe. Because stories like this, we're just getting started.